Alright, so I'm going to be walking you guys through setting up your scope for solar viewing. Now, take in mind that you should never look at the sun without proper solar filter set up and whatnot, because if you want to go blind, then feel free to go ahead and do that, but I highly recommend that you don't, because once you go blind, it's irreversible. So, before you guys, I'll do a video on the refractor another time, but this one's going to be for the Schmidt Cassegrain. So, for example, the Celestron SE series mounts and telescope, which it'll look like this type of telescope. So you can see the orange, that's a Schmidt Cassegrain. So you don't want to set your scope up like I have. You want to face the actual scope tube the opposite direction of where the sun is facing, because you don't want to put your solar filter on with it facing the sun, because you'll damage the optics on the mirrors and whatnot. So you want to face the scope the opposite direction to where the sun is facing. Next thing you're going to want is very important. You're going to need a solar filter. This is a Mylar solar filter, and it's basically Mylar, which is not really that great of a material. A lot of people use them because they're actually cheap. The glass ones are a lot better, but they're more expensive to buy. Before you ever use your solar filter, you should always check it to make sure that there's no puncture holes in it before you use it, because if there's holes in it, it'll leak through and you'll get damage to the optics and likely damage your eyes too, depending on how much of a hole it is on there. Disregard your solar filter if it's a Mylar one if there's any type of crack in it at all. Pinholes are not too bad, but you want to be careful. I'd highly recommend, if you get a pinhole in it, you should probably discontinue using that solar filter and buy a new one. So you definitely want to check your solar filter before you use it, and it's optional if you want to do this, but you should check it after you use it to make sure. Another thing is to never leave your telescope unattended, especially around children, because if the solar filter like this one is kind of iffy, it doesn't fit correctly on my scope, which is really risky, but I do my best to tighten it down. You don't want small children to actually pull this cap off while it's viewing the sun, so never leave your telescope unattended around children. Another thing too about the solar filter is you need to give it time to actually heat up with the sun, so you need to take your solar filter out and put it in the sunlight. Now, I highly recommend you have some type of thing to cover the actual filter itself, because the last thing you want to do is like lay it on the ground or lay it on something and something punctures a hole in your solar filter. So make sure that it's in like a plastic or something like that and lay it out so it's exposed to the sun. And another thing too is that the Mylar solar filters, they're quite easy to get puncture holes in them. That's why I prefer like the glass ones, but right now, it's easier to go with a Mylar filter and whatnot. So anyways, you're gonna want to face this, as I said, face the telescope away from the sun, and attach the solar filter onto your scope. And I'll be showing you guys how to locate the sun with the Schmidt Cassegrain. The trick to it is you want to use the shadow of your scope, and I'll show you what I mean. There was something else I wanted to mention too, and I forgot what it was. So hopefully I'll remember what it was, but it's a really important thing, so hopefully I'll remember what the heck I was going to tell you. Oh yeah, don't use your finder scope. Take your finder scope off. It's really important that you take your finder scope off your telescope. You don't want to aim your telescope at the sun with a finder scope on, unless it's a solar finder scope. If you were able to afford a solar finder scope, then you'll probably not even have to worry about watching this video at all, because you should be able to locate the sun with your solar finder scope. But anyways, I'm going to move over to attaching this solar filter on the scope, and then I'll walk you guys through trying to locate the sun using the shadow of your telescope. Alright, when you do get ready to use your solar filter, be careful, because if it's been out in the sun for a bit, if it's got metal or aluminum like this, it's going to be nicely warm, probably really hot. You don't want to burn your fingers with it, but it'll be pretty hot, maybe. Anyways, you want to test the filter though. and make sure that there's no holes in it before you put it on the scope. So I'm going to show you what I mean real quick. So I think you guys can see the sun kind of up there at the top. What you want to do is you want to go all the way around this filter, right? You don't want to go all the way around in a circle to make sure that even all the edges in the center and all that, you don't see any light coming through it. And I mean light by like pinholes or holes in it, because if you do, you don't want to use the filter at all. So you can see the little dot up there, it looks like the moon. I'm going to go all the way around the edges, which I'll do myself, but I wanted to show you what I mean though real quick. So the next part is you're going to want to, if you don't have your diagonal, you should know that you should have your diagonal facing down, so that when you put an eyepiece in, the eyepiece will be facing down to the ground. Because when you go to rotate this telescope to move it to face the sun, you don't want to have the eyepiece facing up, because chances are the sun's going to hit that lens on the eyepiece, and you might actually damage the eyepiece, as well as send in light from the sun into the telescope. So definitely make sure that your diagonal is pointing down to the ground. And next part here is we gotta move the telescope to face the sun, which you can see down there on the ground, the shadow of the scope where it is right now. That's we're going to be facing this. When it's facing the sun, you'll see what I mean, how the shadow looks on the scope itself. So I'm going to go ahead and face it to the scope, towards the direction of where the sun is, but it won't be pointing up at it, because I'll show you how it'll look once you have it pointed towards the direction of the sun. Alright, so the scope is facing the direction of where the sun's going to set at, so that's the location of where the sun is going to be and where it kind of is. Now the part here is the shadow on the ground of where this telescope is, right? As you move the scope up towards the sun, right, your shadow of the scope will form a straight shadow when it's pointing at the sun. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So this is the shadow you're looking for with the scope. The exact design you're looking for on the ground is how the scope will look when the actual telescope is facing. If I can get over this way a little bit. So this is the way the telescope is currently facing right here. Kind of see how the shadow is. The eyepiece is a little bit up like that. It's tricky to get used to, but you'll get it once you have like it patting down. The kind of gap you're looking for is kind of like that gap right there, where you can see the optical tube, right? It's kind of tricky to explain and all that stuff, and trust me, I know how how this is complicated, even though you see how the shadow is facing on the ground. But that's how the shadow needs to be looking for it to be aiming just right at the sun. I highly recommend that you use like a pretty wide field eyepiece too. Like a 40mm eyepiece is pretty good. But if I put this phone here, you can see the sun inside the eyepiece there. There's a sunspot down on the bottom, which is, I have to actually move it up real quick. See if I can show you guys the sunspot. Trying to get it a little bit over this way. Let's see if I can get it or not. Probably not. Oh well. I can barely see it right there in the bottom. Sadly, the way that the light is on this, you probably can't see it. It's a little. It should be down at the bottom there, bottom left. But the way that my lighting is for the phone, I'm just going to be able to show you that. Anyways, though, that's how you find the sun with a Schmidt Cassegrain telescope. Just take some time doing that, and you'll finally get it patted down. It took me a while. I still have some problems every once in a while too, trying to locate the sun. In fact, when I was doing this video, I had a little bit of a hassle trying to find it too. Had to get the shadow just right. But anyways, that's the sun. I figured I'd show you guys that. I'm going to do some quick imaging of the sun real quick Hopefully get some more of the sunspot which we're losing. Anyways, though, hopefully the video has helped you guys out. If not, I apologize. I'll be doing a video soon on the refractor and how to do that with a refractor. But anyways, clear skies to you guys.